the strongest way I know to overcome ego is through immersing yourself in my marim. That we were talking about ego at the Fabrennian. Remember, you gave that great idea of the question is this a control issue or not? Which I really appreciated and related to and remember still. So we're talking about this idea of ego and overcoming the ego and what is the ego and positive ego and negative ego and God ego and the many beautiful ways we went around it. I thought it actually was a really nice Vibranian, really authentic Vibranian. At one point in that, I shared that, as I understand it, Hasidus is the cure for ego, meaning, I don't know, cure is the right word, but the more we immerse ourselves in my Marim or Tanya, pure Hasidus, the greatest power to overcome and shrink our ego. People are saying, like, yeah, I don't really relate to a mimer. Mimer is talking about all these, like, godly stuff out there. It's not really something I understand or relate to or take personally. Like if I'm learning a sikha talk of the rabbi, I can apply it very easily, very naturally. I can enjoy it intellectually. I relate to it more. And I said, that's true, that a sikha you could relate to more. But a mimer is like an immersion in godliness. And when you immerse yourself, when you put yourself deep into godliness, that godliness changes you. That godliness shifts you. It's like a sauna, a mikvah, totally going under and into godliness. And when you come out, your mind is a little more aligned with Hashem's thinking and a little less aligned with the world's thinking. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit, like Rabbi Akiva's rock, drop, 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 little by little, through immersing ourselves in pure Hasidus and Maimarim and Tanya, as Nechami said correctly, also Tanya, it changes us. It changes the way we look at the world. We look at the world through godly eyes, through eyes of Hasidus, through eyes of purity, of godliness. So that was my plug for Maimarim. So we are coming toward the end, not meaning like we're going to finish it today or highly doubt even next week, but maybe in 3 more times. This very long mimer for us is quite long. Let me just explain where we're holding and we will keep going. We'll actually get to something a little more what we'll call relevant, that we can understand the relevance. So we've been discussing Shabbos Mincha Shmona Esrei. I hope all of you, when you daven Mincha on Shabbos, you reach those words and you're like, wait, I know what this is talking about. You could put a marker in your siddur so you remind yourself when you reach those words. I did that. So we said the first trio, before primordial constriction. Then Teres Gedula, Teres Yeshua. Those 3, Chesed Gevur Tiferes, after Tzimtzum Harishon, after the primordial constriction. Adam Kadmon, all the way through Kesser Batzilus. Then Avni Ogel, Yitzchak Yiranen, Yaakov Ben Yenuchavo, Chesed Gevur Tiferes within Atzilus. And then Menucha, going to our 3 Menuchas, Chesed Gevur Tiferes within Atzilus as they descend. Not anymore Chesed Gevur Tiferes, that was Avni Ogel, Yitzchak Yiranen, Netzach, Chayit, and Yisai. And then we said that all of these levels, going all the way to Chesed Gevur Tiferes, prior to Tzimtzum Harishon, we, the Jew, brings down to ourselves into the world. And then the last phrase, which was like, whoa, higher, because it wasn't part of the trios. We had 4 trios. And after the trios, we had an extra line. Menucha Shlema She'ata Roitze Ba. A complete menucha that you want. And we explained, whoa, this is so high. Because it's a menucha shlema, complete menucha, she'ata. She is the shin that has the 3 lines, but it's all as one. So like what's going to be the roots of the Chesed Gevur Tiferes, where it's still all contained as one entity, literally one letter. And then ata, full blown, you, chesed. And we're like, she and ata, she. So high that it's the roots and it cannot yet even be Chesed Gevur Tiferes Kodim HaTzimtzum, because it's not even 3 separate things. It's all in one letter. There's 3 lines in that one letter. But then ata is clear, overt chesed, and it's one word. So that means it's such a high level that it takes the she and it takes the ata and it puts it together. And what is this? This, we said, is the pshitus of Ein Sof. This is beyond Chesed Gevur Tiferes. This is Ein Sof, and Ein Sof in its pshitus, as we explained the idea, simplicity, which simplicity in our world seems, oh, like she's so simple, not a compliment. But when we're talking about the language of Hasidus and talking about Hashem and his reality, Pshitus is whoa, because Pshitus means there's nothing but him. Pshitus means, like, the contrast to Pshitus is what we call Harkava, when there's combined parts. So parts means there's this expression and there's this expression, and we have these building blocks, we put them together. Pshitus means deeper than all that. It's just him. There's nothing to talk about. So Pshitus of Ein Sof, the simplicity of the infinity of God that does nothing to say but infinity. We're higher than Chesed Gevurah. We're higher than the roots of Chesed Gevurah. We're higher than the Shin, which will be the roots of Chesed Gevurah. We're higher than all of that. That's the Pshitus of the Ein Sof. And that we also draw down. The Jew is so high. The Jew is so high, we draw down those 4 levels of Chesed Gevurah. The Jew is so high, we draw down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof higher than any of those 4 levels of Chesed Gevurah. And then we said, this is the new point we're developing, how are we so high? What about us draws down this Pshitus of the Ein Sof? My gosh, even higher than what we thought was incredible, crazy high that we draw it down. And we're going even higher. And yeah, the Jew, we draw it down. How do we draw it down? Because we have a Pshitus inside our soul. And the Pshitus of our soul, that core, simple, like indivisible part, is the Yechida. Generally speaking, when Hasidus is talking about the core of the soul, they say Yechida, even though Yechida is not core. There are 5 levels of soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Yechida is the 5th and highest level, but it's a level. Deeper than Yechida is the core, but we can't name the core because it's unnameable. A name is a limitation, and if we named it, it's not core anymore. My assumption is when the Rebbe here is talking about the Pshitus of Yechida, it also contains deeper than Yechida, the core that's unnameable because it's core. And that Pshitus power evokes the Pshitus of the Ein Sof and draws it down to us. So what do we mean about this Pshitus of the Ein Sof, of the Yechida, which draws down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof? So whoever says this Pshitus means there's levels in the soul, right? I told you there's 5 levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And as we're looking at it in the context of this Maimer, we have Pnimius powers of the neshama, inner powers, which means they're small enough to get inside, in a sense have an advantage because they're inside and affect you more, in a sense are weaker, that's how they could get inside. We have, as we discussed in this Maimer, Kochos Makifim, external, broader, too powerful to get inside powers, within which has 2 levels, Makif HaKar and Makif HaRachok. This is actually, if we want a thought from the Maimer of Yud Shvat of this year, from Yud Shvat Membav, this point the Rebbe discusses at length there. Makif HaKarov, Makif HaRachok on many, many levels. So hey, touching that Maimer also, which is nice. This coming Wednesday is Yud Shvat. So it's nice that we have a thought from that Maimer as well. So we have 2 levels of Makifim. Makifim means encompassing power. Encompassing powers means too big to get inside, remote, detached. But there's 2 types of Makif. There's a Makif HaKarov, encompassing power that relates to the we'll call it the wearer, the one being surrounded, the soul, or the person, or Hashem, or the world, whatever you're talking about. And there's a Makif HaRachok, an encompassing power that's way too big, seemingly, to be affected by that which it is encompassing. And the traditional Mishalim, the parables for the Makif HaKarov and Makif HaRachok, are clothing versus a house. That clothing, the Makif HaKarov, is affected by the wearer, meaning I'm wearing this sweater. And if I was 20 pounds heavier, the sweater would look different on me. And if I was 20 pounds lighter, the sweater would look different on me. Because it's a makif, it's outside of me. True, but it's karov. It's affected by the wearer because it's going to hang differently. It's that close. Yes, it's outside, but it's not so outside. It's that close that it is affected by me. And the traditional classical parable for Makif HaRachok, the far makif, is a house, because the house is not affected by how many people are in the house. And if you put 100 people in your house, there'd be a lot of people in the house, there'd be a lot of noise, it might be hot, they might get very dirty, they might knock down your plants, they might destroy your china or your knickknacks. They probably would, but the walls of the house don't change. The walls of the house are impervious to how many people are in the house. And if you put 200 people in your house, again, you lost everything got destroyed, everything got eaten, everything's a mess. But the walls of the house don't change. They don't bulge. And if suddenly there was 3 people in the house, the walls of the house aren't going to shrink. The walls of the house are not going to be affected by how many people are in the house because it's a makif harachok. It's detached, it's remote. And both, of course, have an advantage because if you're saying the advantage of makif encompassing is so powerful, well, obviously, makif harachok, so powerful that we're impervious to what we are surrounding. Whoa, is that powerful? So that's better. On the other hand, you could say, well, makif hakarov has an advantage because it has like a bit of both. On one hand, it's a makif, it's too powerful to get in, so it's powerful. On the other hand, it's affected by you, so it does have a relationship to you, which means it's easier for you to access its energy. So, hey, that has almost a duality of advantages. And then you can look at the pnimi and say, well, on the other hand, it's the weakest, but it got inside, so it can most affect me, though it's a weaker voice, but it's a voice inside of me. So that has its own advantage. So these are, if we would like to look at the powers of the soul, of course, this doesn't only apply to the powers of the soul. We could talk about the Mali and Saivev and many other dimensions like this. But in this mind, we're talking using these three terms, which I went into a little bit more than I might have because this is in the mind of Yeshvat Tavshim and Vav. So we are bringing that energy in here as well, which is nice. Because I did have the thought, should I just take a break today and do Yeshvat and Vav? And I'm like, no, we're moving with this mimer. We've been in it long enough and we're going to keep going with it. But it's nice to bring in something from Yeshvat Mevav as well. So in our neshama, we have some of our powers of the soul are pnimim. They're within the boundaries of the soul. So they're weaker and internalized. And obviously those are very affected by the soul because they're pnimi. And then the soul has two levels of akifim, of encompassing powers, karov and rachel, the clothing of the house, close and far. And obviously, in a sense, we could say, oh, well, that's not so affected by the soul. But that's not true. Because obviously, a makif hakaro, the one like the clothing, is very affected by the soul. Just as we said, the sweater will look different on me. And if I gave it to each person in this class or every person in my house, it will look different on each person because it's going to hang differently based on the body inside. So obviously, the powers of the soul that are makif hakaro, encompassing clothes, are affected by the wearer, are affected by the soul's powers. So they're also under the influence of the soul, so to speak. Well, then you have makif harachel. You can say, well, makif harachel, that's not affected. That's like the house. However many people you put in the house, it doesn't change the walls of the house. They don't shrink, they don't expand, they don't bulge, they don't contract. Those powers are impervious to the soul. But the Rebbe says not really. Because a makif harachel has a relationship to makif hakaro because they're both makifim, like they're on the same team, so to speak. They're in the same camp. They're both in the camp of makif powers, encompassing powers. So the makif harachel, the distant makif, connects to the makif hakaro, the closer makif. And the makif hakaro is obviously very affected by the soul. So therefore, even the makif harachel is affected by the soul. So the pneumic power and the makif hakaro power. And we've even proven the makif harachel power. They all, to a certain degree, are affected, which means, and this is why we're explaining this, they have a certain limitation. If you're affected by something, you're limited by it. If you care about people's opinion of you, so you're affected by that and you're limited by it because you won't do this, or it's not proper to do that, or you can't say this, or you shouldn't wear that, because you're affected, aka limited, by people's opinion of you, if that affects you. And so to anything else that affects you, anything that affects you, if you are affected by the quality of the air you breathe, then when you're in a pure air environment, it helps you. And when you're in a toxic air environment, it hurts you because you're affected by it. You're limited by it. So whatever we're affected by, we're limited by. So the pnimi, inner power of the soul, and the makif hakaro power of the soul, and even, as we've explained, the makif harachel power of the soul, because rachel is like karo, because they're both makifim, so therefore they have a relationship. They all are affected by the soul, which means limited by the soul, which means even the makif harachel power of the soul is limited, but not the yechida. The yechida is not pnimi. It's not makif hakaro. It's not makif harachel. It's not limited. It's pshitus. Just like we said, this highest term we could use for God is pshitus, simplicity, meaning like simple, indivisible, not compartmentalized, nothing we could talk about because it's just him. Once we can really start giving it names and terms and dimensions, it's not just him, pure him. Ein Sof is, Pshitus is just pure him. Just like is explained Chassidus in the talk of the Rebbe that's entitled Inyana Shel Torah Chasidus, on the essence of Chasidus, the Rebbe there explains that's what Chasidus is. All Torah is the will and wisdom of God. All Torah is coming from the highest level we can imagine. But every other dimension of Torah besides Chasidus is limited by the boxes that it becomes. Pshat, Remez, Drush, Said, whatever it is. The Chasidus is beyond any boxes. Chasidus doesn't have any boxes. It's Pshitas. It's just God's will and wisdom. And as such, that shines through it in whatever situation it descends to. Like if Hasidus is going to explain a Rambam, or a Rashi, or a Minhag Yisrael. Well, those are boxes. Yeah, but Hasidus is beyond the boxes. So it shines with a light beyond box within those boxes. That's the power of Pshitas. That's like the idea of oil. That oil spreads through everything, flavors everything, but remains separate. It's separate. If it sits, the oil flows to the top. If it gets colder, the oil congeals, right? It's separate. Well, why does oil congeal, but other things don't? Because they become part of the mixture. But oil always stays separate from the mixture, right? You have those little oil bubbles floating on top, separate from the mixture. Flavors the mixture, flows through the mixture, but separate from the mixture. That's oil, that's Hasidus, and that's the Yechida. The Pshitus of the soul is the Yechida. And that power, the Pshitus of the soul, not affected by any part of the soul, not limited by any aspect of soul, is what can draw down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof. So the point the Rebbe then develops is that this Pshitus is the same in every single Jew. Meaning, when we're talking about the powers of soul that we can express as a power, like the inner powers, the Makiv HaKarov powers, the Makiv HaRachok powers, well, every soul is different. Obviously, as we discuss in Tanya, every soul travels, and every soul, every level she travels through covers over her powers, and some souls travel more, and some souls travel less, and some souls remain in Atzilas, and some souls go all the way down to Asiya, and within Asiya, there's some 900 levels, and some souls go very low down in those levels. So every soul is different in terms of the development of the soul, the powers of the soul, the abilities of the soul. Every soul is different. But when we're getting to the pshitas of the soul, that's like core, right? I said we're using the term Yechida, but I really feel it's for deeper than Yechida as well. It's that core essence that we can't give a name to, because any name would be a limitation. So we're not limiting. We don't have a name for it. When we're on that level of core, every soul is the same. And this is compared to the concept of, in Shabbos, remember, we're talking about Shabbos here, of course, the idea of the Dalit Amos of a person. That once you come to, like, Adam Im Komo B'Yom HaShabbos, don't leave your place on Shabbos. Well, what's your place? Dalit Amos. That's like, so to speak, the dimensions a human body takes up. And now we're going to not make it as like a human body, but lay it out as like feet or yards, and Amos is like 1.5 foot. So Dalit Amos is like 6 feet. So wherever you are, you could have another 6 feet, your Dalit Amos, to go further, unless of course you make like an Erev Tafshilin or something. And everyone has things that they possess that are not part of the Dalit Amos, like your house. Your house isn't, oh, in your house you can only go 6 feet, then you're stuck unless you put food there before Shabbos. Or no, of course not. It's your house, right? It is your house, and therefore that issue is not relevant. Once you leave your house, once you're not in your house, in your garments, in your inner stuff, then begins that dimension of Dalit Amos. So people have different houses. You could have a 1-room shack. You could have a mansion of 25 rooms. Everyone has a different house. You could have 3 items of clothing. You could have 30 items of clothing. People have different clothing. You have different inner powers. Someone else has their own inner powers. So in all of those levels of Pnimi, Makiv HaKarov, Makiv HaRachok, our inner powers, our external but very close to us, our external and far from us, we're all different. We all have different homes. We all have different wardrobes. We all have different inner powers. We're different. But the Dalit Amos is the same for every single Jew. Every single Jew gets however far their house extends, plus Dalit Amos. We all get that plus Dalit Amos. All get the same Dalit Amos. The greatest tzaddik, the most simple Jew, the wisest Jew, the most ignorant Jew, we all get Dalit Amos. Because Dalit Amos is expressing this idea of the Yechida, this power that's not divisible, not differentiating, Not different for this one or this one. It's the exact same for all of us. And where do we see this practical expression of this Daled Amos, of the Yechida Pshita's power of every Jew? In our Mesiras Nefesh. The Mesiras Nefesh of a Jew is coming from, as we're calling those Daled Amos, coming from that Pshitas of Yechida, or deeper than Yechida, core energy of the soul of the Jew. And it's the same for every Jew, which historically makes a lot of sense. Because if we look at the history of the Jewish people, we have a history of self-sacrifice. And we could say, well, we're not unique. I mean, there are other cultures and other peoples, and there are many cultures and peoples in the world, and many religions, for that matter, lahavdil, that sacrificed for their cause. It's not unique to the Jew and the pshitas of the Yechida, but it is, because of exactly this point the Rebbe is making, that in any other culture or society, you can talk about the Japanese kamikaze pilots, whatever you want to discuss, these people sacrificed for their belief system because they were adherents of that belief system, because they believed in that belief system. And again, we could look historically. There were many people that were martyred for their beliefs, But by the Jewish people, it's different. By the Jewish people, every single Jew has the exact same power of self-sacrifice, because it comes from the pshitas of the Yechida, which is the same by every Jew. It's not limited, affected by our soul powers. It's got nothing to do with our soul powers. It's like the oil, like the Chassidus. It penetrates all, flavors all, and is not affected by anything. Remote from all. That's the Yechida of every Jew. And therefore, a Jew who didn't live for God will die for God. In all these other cultures and societies, people die for their beliefs, but they also live for them. But in the Jew, people that don't live for their belief system, unfortunately, when they're in the situation, and unfortunately, we have way too much experience in these situations. We're very experienced and accustomed to these situations. Jews self-sacrifice. Jews that never cared about being Jewish self-sacrifice for Judaism. I mean, we have now, post October 7th, very clearly so many of the hostages that were freed when they share their experiences. And again, putting in the context that all these people were, I mean, generally all these people, I don't want to say for sure, but seemingly were very far from God when they were taken. And so many of them have the most inspiring words about their self-sacrifice for God in their captivity. Self-sacrifice to not eat chametz Pesach, to fast on Yom Kippur, to make kiddush on Shabbos, to not convert. I mean, there was many of them spoke about this pressure of converting. And I mean, like, what do these people care? So many. I mean, we've all heard the stories, story after story after story of people that never thought they cared about being Jewish until they were in those situations, and suddenly they self-sacrificed because they're a Jew. This is the point the Rebbe is saying. If it came from our merits, if it came from our knowledge of God, if it came from our developed connection to God, these people don't have a chance. They don't have any of those things. But it doesn't come from any of those things. It comes from the pshitas of the Yechida, of the soul, where we are all the same. And therefore, every single Jew has the ability to self-sacrifice, coming from this pshitas of the Yechida, and self-sacrifices exactly the exact same way.
Since it's so quiet, maybe I could ask, can you sum up a little bit of what I missed? Or just like which nekudos does that connect to?
We were talking last week in the Tefillah of Shemona Esrei that we say that last phrase after those 4 sets of 3 was that plus one phrase, which expressed an even higher level of connection to Hashem than any of these 4 levels of Chesed Gvur Tiferes, even Chesed Gvur Tiferes Kodim HaTzimtzum. That level, if you remember, was the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And then the Rebbe said, and the Jew brings us down as well, the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And then the question was, how do we bring down the Pshitas of the Ein Sof? Who are we? But anyway, who are we to bring down all those levels of Chesed Kavod Tiferes also? But for sure, are we to bring down Pshitas of Ein Sof? And we said because we have this Pshitas inside of us, the Pshitas of the Echid of our soul. And then the Rebbe developed, and we spoke at length about how all these powers of the soul, Pnimi, Makav HaKarav, Makav HaRachov, are affected by the soul, limited by the soul, have gvul, have limitation, have boundaries, have parameters. But the Pshitas of the Echida isn't affected by anything. Like the oil, flavors everything, penetrates everything, isn't affected by anything, is separate from it all. And that is the level that's absolutely Pshitas in the soul. And that is the level that draws down the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And that Pshitas means it's not affected by the powers or limits of the soul. And therefore, it's the same in every single Jew. And this, the Rebbe says, is expressed in the ability of a Jew to be Meiser Nefesh. That therefore, every Jew's Mesiras Nefesh is exactly the same. And a tzaddik doesn't have a greater copyright on Mesiras Nefesh than the simplest Jew. Because it's not coming from our powers at all. It's coming from the Pshitas of our soul. And the Pshitas of every soul is the same. So the Rebbe says if we would look inside, actually, after we say, Menucha Shlema She'ata Roitzeba, it goes on to say, Val Menucha Sam Yakdishu Es Shemecha. And on this Menucha, Yakdishu Es Shemecha, they will sanctify your name. Meaning, again, first we went through these 4 levels of Chesed Kavod Tiferes. We draw that all down. We're more powerful than all that. Even Chesed Kavod Tiferes Kodim and Tzimtzum. And then we spoke about Menucha Shlema She'ata Roitzeba, Pshitas of the Ein Sof, She'ata. And we draw that down too. How do we draw that down? Who are we? We're Jews. We're souls. We have the Pshitas of the Echida. We could draw this down. And then it continues to say, Al Menucha Sam, and on this Menucha, Yakdishu, they will sanctify your name. They will be Meiser Nefesh. How do we sanctify the name of God? By our Mesiras Nefesh. It's very interesting. The Rebbe pointed out a beautiful diuk here, a beautiful specificity in these words. Val Menucha Sam Yakdishu Es Shemecha. They will sanctify your name. What does that mean? They will sanctify your name. It means what it says. They will draw down sanctity to the name of Hashem himself. This is what it means, Mesiras Nefesh. When we are Meiser Nefesh, when we self-sacrifice for God, and again, self-sacrifice doesn't only obviously mean like what those captives of Hamas went through, and it doesn't mean what the world's been washed in the blood of the Jews. What that means, we all have Mesiras Nefesh. Trust me, we do. All the times we crush our will to do Hashem's will, and all of us are torn in myriads of pieces, but we still keep going on. We still keep trucking. You're still learning the mimer. You prioritize. You put aside your will, maybe to crash, maybe to clean your house. Who knows? Maybe to get to bed earlier tonight, and you put it aside. You're self-sacrificing. And when we do self-sacrifice, Yakdishu Es Shemecha, we draw sanctity to the name of Hashem. Meaning, when we think of being Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, right? That's the term used, Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. Someone who's Meiser Nefesh, someone who's self-sacrificed, she is Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. What does that phrase mean? I don't know. We give honor to Hashem's name. Like he's so great because look how we serve him, right? That's what it means. And by the way, that's true. Every time a Jew self-sacrifices, this brings honor to Hashem's name. This sanctifies the glory of God because look how your people serve you. It's 100% true. It's the meaning of the words, and it's absolutely true. And that's why halacha l'maisa, in certain situations, you must self-sacrifice, which are gilei raya, shvichus damim, idolatry, adultery, murder. No choice. You must self-sacrifice. If it's a gezerah shmad, if they're trying to destroy Judaism, you must self-sacrifice for anything, for how to tie your shoes. But there's other situations where you're not allowed to self-sacrifice, or you could, but it's optional. And where you could optionally self-sacrifice is where there's a concept of they know it's Judaism, they're doing this to wipe out Judaism, and other Jews or other people will know of this. And therefore, it will Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. It will bring sanctity to God because you are sacrificing your life for him, or sacrificing your comforts, or sacrificing you're suffering or not for him. So that is the idea of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem. And that's why halacha l'maisa, if it's optional, meaning it's not idolatry, adultery, murder, it's not exer shmad, when this is being done to wipe out Judaism, and nobody will know. Nobody knows you're Jewish. Nobody ever heard of a Jew. Nobody's doing this for Judaism. Nobody will ever be inspired by it. You're not allowed to do it. What do you mean? I don't want to do this Aveira. I want to self-sacrifice for God. God says that's not called for me. If there's no benefit, if there's no sanctification of my name, if my name is not glorified, because nobody even knows. So that is how we normally think of this concept, which again is throughout Torah literature when we discuss the idea of self-sacrifice. The Kadesh Shem Shemayim Berabim, Kiddush Shem Shemayim Berabim, Kiddush Shem Shemayim, and that's the term used, and that's how we understand it. But the Rebbe here is adding an unbelievable deal. The Rebbe is saying, but that's not the literal translation. What literally it is, Yakdishu es Shemecha, it really means we draw sanctity to your name. We, by our actions, infuse your name with an extra Kedusha. And the Rebbe says, that's what's happening. And who's able to do this? Any Jew. Every Jew. You're Jewish, you could mekadesh shem shamayim. You could draw Kedusha into Hashem's name. Your actions could make Hashem's name have a greater Kedusha than it had before your self-sacrifice. And again, the point that I was making here is, and this is a free club, every single Jew has the same ability to do this because this comes from the pshitus of the Yechida of our soul, and on the level of pshitus of the Yechida, every Jew is the same. The Rebbe says, and this of course goes back to our starting point, we are getting closer to it, that we see this actually in Shabbos. Remember, this whole mimer started and is circling around the concept of Shabbos, like this tefillah that we've been dissecting is mincha of Shabbos. The original point of the mimer was the specialness of Yaakov connected to keeping the Shabbos. So now that we're getting sort of back to our starting point, there is a Shabbos is different than any other mitzvah because most mitzvahs, who does them affects how they're done. I mean, that's just obvious. If a great tzaddik is putting on tefillin and any simple Jew is putting on tefillin, it's not exactly the same. Yeah, of course, they're both doing the mitzvah and they both get a check on their chart that they did the mitzvah, but obviously it's different. Obviously, the spirituality, the intention is so different, tefillin of a tzaddik and tefillin of a simple Jew. And so too with every other mitzvah. With all mitzvahs, a very great portion of a mitzvah is kavana, is intention, is ava and yira, is emotion, love and fear of God. And the more intention and emotion you infuse in your mitzvah, the more soul your mitzvah has. There's the body of the mitzvah, and there's the soul of the mitzvah. And kavana, intention, love and fear is the soul of the mitzvah. So if a great tzaddik is doing a simple mitzvah, it looks a lot different because it has a very different soul. That's true for all mitzvahs except Shabbos. Shabbos has a certain quality that it says that all Jews are considered the same on Shabbos. It says in one place that like a Jew doesn't lie on Shabbos. All Jews are the same on Shabbos. Shabbos affects all of us in a certain way and elevates all of us in a certain way that now you could say, well, our mitzvahs don't look the same. I agree, but there's a certain sameness of all the mitzvahs because all the mitzvahs are infused with this koyach of Shabbos that we all have the same. Again, connecting to the pshitas of our yechida, connecting to our mesiras nefesh quality, connecting to qualities that have nothing to do with the powers of our soul and therefore the limitations of our soul. Like the Rebbe says, obviously the tainug, the pleasure faculty, there's a mitzvah of oineg Shabbos, having pleasure on Shabbos. And a simple Jew's pleasure is because he has a good chicken or a steak or a roast or wine or cake or chocolate, and we can all go on and on. What are going to be our oineg Shabbos? And obviously, a tzaddik's oineg Shabbos is going to look quite different. And the tzaddik's oineg Shabbos will be from the spirituality of Shabbos, from his tefillos on Shabbos, from his learning Torah on Shabbos, of course. But they both have this mitzvah of oineg Shabbos. Different window dressing, a nice cholent, an amazing tefillah, but they both have oineg. They both are fulfilling Einik Shabbos, and it's the same concept. And the Rebbe says it's true in all aspects of Shabbos that there's a commonality of all Jews, specifically in terms of Shabbos. The Rebbe gives another example where he speaks about like Menucha Shabbos. And he says, what does it mean, Menucha Shabbos? Well, the resting on Shabbos comes from, as we actually discussed in a different line where we learned, what we accomplished during the 6 days of the week, that the rest of Shabbos is created by those 6 days of the week. So for a tzaddik, what is he resting? What is the idea? What's the spiritual concept of Menucha Shabbos? It doesn't mean how long was Shabbos have. It means he worked on birur all week long. Shabbos is not about birur. The work of the week is birur. So 6 days he's working on birur, on birur, on birur, and it comes Shabbos, and there's a menucha, there's a vayachulu, there's the elevation of all those sparks. That's the tzaddik's menuchas on Shabbos. And you take a simple Jew, you take us, us simple Jews, and we also have a tremendous menucha on Shabbos because we work hard all week long, and we don't get that much sleep, and we have a lot of pressure, and we have a lot of overstimulation from all of the social media and devices. We've got a lot of stress on our life. And then Shabbos comes and for 25 hours, it's over. It's quiet. You can get a good night's sleep. Menucha Shabbos. So my Menucha Shabbos looks very different than a tzaddik's Menucha Shabbos. But we both have true Menucha Shabbos. The commonality here is we all have Menucha Shabbos, yes, with different window dressing. That's the window dressing. The core Menucha Shabbos, we all have the same. Yes, we all have different Einig on Shabbos from my food, from Torah and Tefillah, but we all have Einig on Shabbos. It's the same. Why? Why is that true for Shabbos and nothing else? Because this is the idea of this pshitus of this mitzvah, that it's different than every single mitzvah, that it's not limited, it's not affected, it's not within that box that makes it small enough to be affected by. And that's why your spirituality or greater spirituality or lack of spirituality has nothing to do with anything, because it's not affected by any of those things. It's beyond all of those things. So you're a simpler person of Vaida, a greater person of Vaida, it's all the same, which creates a tremendous commonality among all Jews in our Avodah on Shabbos. So the Rebbe says, now it all makes sense. We said before that there's the pshitus of the Ein Sof, drawn down by the pshitus of the Yechida, the soul of the Jew, which is reflected in this halachic concept of Dalit Amos, right? That I said it's a law in Tchum Shabbos that you have till the borders of the city, till the borders of your house, and then you got 4 amos, and we all have the same 4 amos. Doesn't make a difference, like we said, how many clothing you have in your closet, how large or small is your house, how huge or limited is your city. Everyone has the same plus Dalit Amos. Why? Because Dalit Amos reflects this idea of the pshitus of the Yechida. And it's the same for all of us, because it's not limited or affected by any of us. And now we just said that there's a mitzvah like that. There's a mitzvah that represents this Yechida power, this pshitus power, this not affected by, for better or worse, power. And that mitzvah is called Shabbos. And since Shabbos is not affected by, is not limited by, because Shabbos is the mitzvah that represents this pshitus of Yechida, that's why every Jew Shabbos is the same. Every Jew has that same energy of Shabbos. And though I might do it this way, and another person might do it that way, but it's all the same. It's all the service of Shabbos. And the Rebbe says, aha, that's why the Dalit Amos of a person, halacha lemaisa, has to do with the law of Shabbos. Meaning there's this concept called Dalit Amos, that a body takes up Dalit Amos, the body, and if you extend yourself, it's Dalit Amos. Who cares? Well, it's most relevant in terms of the laws of Shabbos, of Tchum Shabbos, that however far you can go through inhabited space, like the boundaries of the city, a common example, you then can walk 6 more amos. Who can walk 6 more amos? Everyone can walk 6 more amas. We all have the same 6 amas. Well, if it's the dimensions of the body of a person, shouldn't a taller person get more than 6 amas and a shorter person get less than 6 amas, or a thinner person get less than 6 amas and a more obese person get more than 6 amas? No, it's the same for everyone. Everyone gets the same 4 amas. I'm thinking 6 because 4 amas is 6 feet. The same 4 amas. Again, it's bringing out the sameness of the Jew. So Daled Amos, expressing the idea of the Pshishas of the Yechida, is the factor in Tchum Shabbos, because Shabbos as a mitzvah is the Pshishas of the Yechida, as Daled Amos in Halacha is the Pshishas of the Yechida. So we have the Pshishas of the Yechida. We're drawing down the Pshishas of the Ein Sof. This is expressed in a halachic concept called Daled Amos. This is expressed in a mitzvah called Shabbos, and Daled Amos relates to Tchum Shabbos because they're both reflections of the Pshishas of the Yechida. So we are not done, but I thought the Rebbe just did something like so amazing here in pulling these seemingly very separate pieces together and showing how the core is the same. The core is the Pshishas of the Yechida of the Jew. And that's what makes every Jew the same, and every Jew's Shabbos, in a sense, the same, and every Jew's self-sacrifice the same. So we're amazing. That was the bottom line, of course, of all this. Hope your Shabbos might taste a little different because of this mimer. Mirza Hashem to be continued, and I confidently